Wagwan, welcome back to Chaz's No Bullshit Reptile Advice. Today's question comes from Skleth. I think a good video would be one about reptile shops and the scummy practices such as co-housing solitary animals and keeping animals in completely inadequate housing under the guise of it being temporary and perfectly fine because of it. I was in a shop the other day with some 9 to 10 foot retics in 3 foot vivs and an adult panther chameleon in what looked like an 18-inch cube. Last week along with the usual... in an 18-inch cube last week. Along with the usuals like co-housing beardies and rankins, and honestly practices like that ruin shops with very knowledgeable owners for me. Well, Skleth, it's a good question. It puts me on a slightly sticky wicket because I feel like I'm speaking for all shops, and I think that that's a dangerous position to be put in. Not all shops are cut from the same cloth. I do think in certain elements of your question you may be being slightly unfair, and then in other parts I agree completely. So I suppose it's open to interpretation, the overall cleanliness. It's hard. The truth be told, when you say that there's no argument for stuff being temporary, my counter to that is there is an argument to be temporary. What I struggle with the principle of shops all becoming bioactive, really complex setups, really involved rigs, all the rest of it. As company policy at the shop, myself and Paul, we strip out F10, which is a disinfectant available in the UK, our tanks, and reconstruct. Very simple, using loose substrates that can be easily removed, logs and plants which are artificial that can be cleaned, and then returned to the tank once clean and dry for the new inhabitant. This is something we've always done. So on purpose our tanks tend to be somewhat stripped back and simple, on the principle that we turn around a pretty impressive amount of livestock. I mean, is that the mark of a successful shop, turning the livestock round? Or are we supposed to want to have it for a long time? In which case, if we made super complex rigs for the animals while they were in our care, for them to be there 6 to 10 days and then sold, well then the cost of stripping that out would be exponential and rob us of any profit. So in my mind, for me, it's just not fruitful to do that. So we keep it relatively simple. I mean, they've got hides, they've got logs, they've got plants, but we haven't gone overboard by any stretch of the imagination, because there has to be a level of practicality to it. If the suggestion is that we have bioactive rigs that are isopodded up and all the rest of it, they're not stripping that out. They're taking one animal out and putting another animal in. But to me, that's wrong. That's how stuff gets transferred. That's why we use barrier control. That's why we clean out the vivs after an inhabitant's been in there. Yeah, to me, I don't support that theorem. It's personal taste. There are people that love bio, that want to do that. It's fine. I just don't think in a professional realm where we turn over livestock, and as distasteful as people could find it, the whole principle of being in business, owning a pet shop, is to turn livestock round, have a good reputation, a customer base like ours that's nationwide, where we send animals out in a DEFRA registered courier, and that whole principle supports the fact that we're a conscientious shop. We wouldn't get the trade that we have unless we were good at the job that we purport to do. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we wouldn't shift it otherwise. We wouldn't sell the gear. If we were a shit shop, we did it a shit way, we didn't keep our animals well, and they were in dirty tanks or whatever, then I suppose we wouldn't sell the stock. We shared photos of our viv rigs, and they're just modest, simplistic, they're not overly complex. I mean, I've got all the respect in the world for these shops that can do it, but for me, it just doesn't make any sense. There's only me and Paul there. We don't like the idea of having the kids or skivvies there doing it for us. We want to do it all ourselves. So maybe that's more out of that we keep it slightly more simple. See, the difficulty is I can't really speak at length about the other shops and what their practices are. I can only really refer what you're asking to how we run our shop. 9 and 10 foot retics in a 3 foot viv. As long as you're not exaggerating, that's disgusting. We wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do that. But then, you know, where do I want to go with this? Nine and 10 foot retics, they're in 3 foot vivs, that's not good. But that said, we are dealing with shops that may turn livestock round. As long as it's not a shop pet, temporary housing, I believe there is an argument for. I don't think that should necessarily be abused, but I think that it's being obtuse on purpose to ignore it as a factor. Would we only keep animals in vivs that we would sell them in the shop? In honesty, no. We would sell them bigger. The new laws that are coming in the AAL, I think, are the wrong way round. I think that it's the public who are going to be keeping them in forever homes. And if anybody needs to have the 10 by 5 viv, it's the person who's keeping the retic for 20 years, not the person who's keeping it for 14 days. That's not to say that there aren't improvements that should be made. The legislation that's there is 65, 66 years old. It needs improvement, and things do need to improve. And there is a drive now more than ever regarding standards within shops and within private homes, and the drive from people like Advancing Herpetological Husbandry is there because there is a hunger. They would not have found the success that they have unless the hunger and the appetite was there. The raising of standards is great and very welcome, and for me the AAL per se doesn't cause me a huge amount of issues. It's not something that overly concerns me. I think that it would be overly simplistic to assume that shops can afford to give their animals forever home size enclosures whilst they are with them. So we have, I don't know, 600 square foot in the shop and 60 vivs. So there's a certain amount of vivs per square foot within the shop. If when the AAL comes in, we increased all of our vivs commensurate to the size of the animals in them, you know, we would be running a deficit of maybe 10 to 20% on the vivariums within the shop. So each of those vivariums is an opportunity to sell an animal and is essentially a shop window. So therefore the profit per vivarium is increased, which then could have knock-on effects with prices. So these are considerations for us. I can probably hear coming through this is, I don't care, who gives a shit? Well, I give a shit, it's my shop. I've got people I need to pay, bills. But I hopefully people, after watching all the videos I've put out, wouldn't necessarily jump down my throat saying I don't care about the animals. But I believe, in the interest of balance, that there has to be a balancing act. There has to be this compromise. Wholesalers and importers work to different stipulations. Again, they're bringing the animals in, then they're quite quickly bought up by traders such as myself, who then come to the shop. The animals are then housed individually, or at least they should be, and then rehomed. With regards to group housing bearded dragons, group housing iguanas, water dragons, whatever else, yes, this is a problem. It shouldn't continue all the time. It just shouldn't. That is old hat. It gives the wrong impression. It says to people, by extension, it's okay to keep these animals in groups, and we all know it isn't. They are solitary animals. They will beat the crap out of one another, chop each other's feet off, chop each other's tails off, and then we just perpetuate an issue. You know, I think for me, rather than viv size in shops, I think viv cleanliness to me probably trumps viv size. I'm not saying that viv size is inconsequential, because that would give the wrong impression, or that I'm blasé about the vivarium sizes that me and Paul provide, which I'm not. But I would sooner see a spotless, modest sized tank than a grubby big tank. That's just me. I would also judge the animals based on body weight, body size, how much muscle they've got, tone, how bright and clear their eyes are and alert the animals are within the viv. Because of stressed animals, metabolism runs quick, they lose condition, they metabolize fat, they metabolize muscle, and lose condition quickly. So animals won't stay looking great if they're in a stressed state for very long at all. So I'd be placing my judgments based upon how the livestock looks. If the snake's a bag of bones or the lizards are bags of bones, that tells you the snakes aren't happy and the lizards aren't happy, and they aren't being maintained. And the size of the vivarium's got nothing to do with it. It's got everything to do with the maintenance and how often the people are in there and when they're being fed and how they're being fed and can they hide away and do they have visual barriers from people coming in, that sort of stuff. They're more the concerns of me moving forward as to what we would try and provide to ensure that stress and stressors on the shop stock is kept to a minimum. The babies, we have racking systems for babies. People hate racking systems. That's fine, but I need to have babies in, and I need to have a range of stock. That range of stock comes in the form of my livestock list. If my livestock list was 40% smaller because I can't keep as many babies, would people still travel the length and breadth of the country to come and see us? That's the $1 million question. And not one that I'm willing to just take a punt on. Again, trying to be honest. I mean, the thing is, I could play up to this question. Oh yeah, it's terrible. Rah, 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 rah. You know, we need to do far better. This isn't good enough. Or, as I am with every video that I've ever done, I'll just try and tell the truth as I see it. We've got the babies in separate boxes. They are small boxes, generally for the baby corns and the small neonatal snakes. 4 or 9 litre really useful boxes. Maintained in racking systems. They're cleaned out weekly, fresh water twice a week. They, you know, there's I think 80 boxes. They're fine. We've got the barrier control. We can control if there's mite outbreaks, any respiratory infections. Thankfully, we don't really get the respiratory infections, but it's part of the reason why we don't get that is because everybody's not living in with everybody else. The temptation with giving bigger vivs to shop owners is that then the cohabitation essentially may even happen more. I mean, even with these new rules, there's no necessarily I know they have stocking densities, but I can keep 1 snake to a box. I can increase the size of the box or the viv and then keep 5 snakes in that box to try and offset the loss of vivariums per square foot. Does that make sense? It does in my head. But that's what I'm trying to say. If shopkeepers want to bend the new rules to their advantage, they will. And it then becomes more about when you say even knowledgeable owners, they ruin shops. If they're knowledgeable owners, they're going to try. I mean, generally we are animal lovers. We're not necessarily nefarious evil bastards that are setting out to destroy animals' lives or do ill by them. But you know that there is a balancing act between that and then still trying to make a profit, still trying to run a successful business, and looking to shops to be bastions of the absolute pinnacle of husbandry, I think is unrealistic. We're not keeping permanent collections, so I believe that for the most part bioactive and everything is out of the question, simply because how do you strip out, clean out make sure that pathogens from a previous inhabitant aren't still there for the new inhabitant, etc, etc. Or the bacteria that are in there from the previous inhabitant common cell to the new one that you're putting in. Is that transference going to be an issue? Could actually the bioactive pose more of a bio threat than a non-bioactive that's been stripped out and disinfected? So these are, I mean, this is all theoretical and theorem. It's not set in stone. It's not something that I'm just trying to think on my feet. I'm sorry if I'm rambling, because I don't make notes. I've told you this before. So you ask me a question and then I start spitballing about it. But I think it's disingenuous to expect shops to be bastions of the absolute pinnacle of husbandry care. We can, in a professional element, do the very best we can for cleanliness, maintenance, making sure that the information and clarity of information that we can offer you, the infrastructure that we can offer you, the thermostats, the UV lights, all of the dry goods, our own experience from private collections and private rigs that we've had, and animals that we have kept in the past. So that's where that comes in with my brain, Paul's brain. Everything that we've done with our private stuff in the past, we're there. You require an OLED dimmer, an Evo light, an Evo, an Arcadia 12 or 14%, a T5, or this, that. That's what we sell. That's what we do. We're the infrastructure, the information. You take the baton of superb husbandry and you run with it. To expect a shop that every 6 to 12 weeks the animals inside each vivarium are changing, apart from exceptions that stuff sometimes doesn't sell, or if people have got shop pets would fall under the realm of these are permanent pets. These are then expected to be maintained to a standard that such as Gleth, who's raised this question, would find acceptable, because that's its permanent home. There's no way that a shop pet can fall under the same set of standards as shop stock, because we're wanting to keep them stripped back and simple, but then where's the enrichment for a permanent home? So I think that's a slightly different proposition. I think that you find shops that you trust. I think that by communicating with people you can see and judge. I think fecal material, urate, balls, shed skin, slime in the water bowl, shitted up glass that hasn't been cleaned, that for me is a far bigger no, an X in the blotter than Viv size. For me, that's only me. Can I see whether UV is being provided? Can I see whether there's a thermostat in use? Can I see an animal that looks of good body weight, in good condition? It doesn't have shed skin stuck to it. I can't see its hips, I can't see its spine. Its eyes aren't sunken, it's hydrated, it looks bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, it's bouncing around its Viv. Is the food that it's been provided with, if it's having salad, fresh, or is it shit, just cheap, nasty, grimy, horrible? Are the water bowls covered in moss and lime scale stains and all the rest of it? Have the bowls been scrubbed? These are the questions that would be more pertinent to me. Are the UV lights, have they got the darkened collars at the ends that show that the tubes are knackered and old and haven't been replaced any time recently? See where I'm going with this? To me, that stuff is all probably slightly more than the Viv size, although what you have suggested with 9 and 10 foot retics in 3 foot Vivs, that's extreme. That's not acceptable. That's not acceptable. But maybe a 5 or 6 foot retic in a 3 foot Viv for a few weeks, if it's thermostatically controlled whilst it sells in the shop, I would not necessarily have a problem with. Basically, because we do it ourselves. Can it hide? Is it feeding? Can it thermoregulate? Yeah. Would it be suitable as a permanent home? No. But at no point would I suggest that. And if they came in to buy that animal, one, because it's a retic, they'd have to basically crawl over broken glass naked to get me to sell it to them. And then two, they would be taking a 6x2x2 as its start of it for a 5 or 6 foot retic. And then we'd be rigging that out with ceramic, day-night thermostat. If they wanted it, the UV light, the substrates, all the rest of it, we wouldn't be going bio because the prodigious amount of shit and piss that a retic produces. But you know, we would then be trying to furnish them with everything they would need for a very nice looking enclosure. It's difficult for me to talk for other shops. There'll be shop owners out there that will be going mad, screwing at the camera, going, wow, I do it this way, I do it that way. Make a video, start a channel, put your video on. I can only share my own opinion. I don't speak for all shop owners. I've got no interest in speaking for all shop owners. Certainly not there to defend them, defend myself. I think that shops come in all shapes and sizes. We're constrained by being a relatively small shop, 550, 600 square feet. There are other shops that are well over 1,500 to 2,000 square feet who will have a different set of problems. Keeping their room warm, finding enough stock to fill it. There's all sorts of problems all over the place. Dealing with your customers, making sure that you've got your infrastructure all there, your thermostats and everything else that you require. So, you know, it's a difficult one. There's a lot of variables in a reptile shop. It's not as easy as people think. And I don't think any of us set out to be cruel. I think some of us forget our way. Some of us forget it's all about the animals and forget that people are really invested in their pets, and that we need to make sure that that stays at the forefront of our mind. But you know, if you're in debt or you have problems, we've not always killed it at Snakes and Adders. We're doing great now, but we've had rough times, man. And yeah, sometimes other stuff takes priority. Food on the kids' table, paying bills, making sure that the VAT man and tax man are paid. These are all things that you got to do, and they're real, just as real as everything else. And yeah, it can be hard to stay motivated and not get jaded by it, and it can be thankless, because regardless of how hard you think you're working, some upstart who keeps 3 or 4 animals in his bedroom thinks he can pass judgment on you when you've got 300 animals a day to take care of. It's graft. And yeah, sometimes you're not overly receptive to being criticised. I think a bit of criticism every now and again, and somebody just yanking your chain to raise your standards is not necessarily a bad thing. And the raising of standards is something that maybe ought to be championed somewhat more. So those are my thoughts on that. It might not have been what you were expecting, I don't know. I'm just trying to be straight, trying to be honest. It is what it is. So we'll get another question, and we'll do another episode in a few days. We'll see you again soon. Cheers, guys.